Hello guys, welcome back. I'm Yusuf Shakeel and you are watching HTML tutorials. In this video, we are going to learn about HTML forms. So let's get started. I have opened brackets and now I'll go ahead and create a new file and I will save this as forms.html and I'll write the following HTML. So we have the doc type HTML, opening and closing HTML tag, opening and closing head tag. We have set the title to forms and we have the opening and closing body tag, which is empty. And now let us go ahead and open live preview. All right. In HTML, we use forms to collect user data, and forms are very common. For example, when we log into our account, we use the login form. And when we are creating a new account, we use the sign up form. Similarly, when we are searching, we use the search form, and so on. In HTML, we use the form tag to create a form. So let us go ahead and create a form using the form tag. Now inside the opening form tag, we write two attributes. One is the method attribute, the second is the action attribute. The method attribute is used to tell the type of method used to send data from the form to the backend for processing. And the most commonly used methods are get method and post method. The action attribute takes a URL of the script that is going to handle the submitted data. So let us go ahead and create the method attribute and set its value to post, and create the action attribute and we set this value to forms.html. So this form is going to submit data using post method, and it is going to submit data to forms.html file, that is the same file. Now inside the form, we use different types of form controls to take data from the user and send it to the server. So we use single line input field, multi-line input field, radio buttons, checkbox, select options, file upload, reset button, submit button. Now let us go ahead and create a single line input field. So for that, we create an input tag and we set the type attribute value to text. So if you look at the output, you can see we have an input field that can take some text value like stay happy and keep smiling. We can add another attribute to control the number of characters that we can enter in this input field, and that attribute is the max length attribute. And let us set the value to 30 characters. So now this text field can take only 30 characters input. Another attribute that we can add to this input text field is the name attribute, and the value, let's say full name. So the value of this name attribute is used to send data of this input text field to the server. Another attribute that we can add to this input text field is the placeholder attribute. And the value of this placeholder attribute is shown in the input field. So let's say the value of this placeholder is full name. And now if you look at the output, you can see the value of the placeholder attribute shown inside the input field. Now the value of this placeholder will disappear when we start entering data inside this input field. So as I go ahead and write my name, the value of this placeholder disappears. And when the value from this input field is removed, it reappears. Another attribute that we can add to this input text field is the value attribute. And this attribute holds the value of this input text field. So whatever data that we enter in this is automatically saved in this value attribute. And we can also set an initial value for the input text field by assigning some value to this value attribute. So let's say we want an initial value, Yusuf, Shakeel, for this input text field. So if we refresh, we can see this input text field has an initial value, Yusuf, Shakeel. Similarly, we can set the value to, let's say, hello world. And if we refresh, the initial value for this input text field will become hello world. Another commonly used input field is the password field. So let us go ahead and create a password field. So we'll create an input tag, and this time we'll set the type attribute value to password. So we have this input password field, and any value that we enter in this password field, it will be hidden. So for example, if I write root 123, you can see the characters are not shown and the characters are replaced by dots. And like text input field, we can also set the max length attribute for this password field. So let us set the max length to 10 characters. And we can also set the placeholder attribute. And let us set this to password. And we can also add the name attribute, and let us set the value of this name attribute to password. So the value of this name attribute will be used to send data of this password field to the server. Another attribute that we can add is the value attribute, and it holds the value of this password field. And we can also set an initial value to this password input field by setting some value to this value attribute. So let's say root 123. So now if we refresh, we have an initial value set for this password field. If you want multi-line text input, we use the text area. So let us go ahead and create a text area. Now this text area can take some attributes like max length to define the number of characters that we can enter in this text area. Let's say 20. So this text area can now take only 20 characters, like 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see we have 20 characters. The enter character or the new line character is also included. So we have 18 digits and 2 new line characters. If we want to set the rows and columns, that is the number of rows and number of columns for this text area, we use the rows and columns attribute. So let us set the rows to 6 and columns to, let's say, 30. Now if we refresh, you can see this text area will now have 6 rows and 30 columns. We can also add the placeholder attribute to this text area opening tag. And let's set the value to enter your text. And we can also have the value attribute. This will hold the value of this text area. And we can also add the name attribute. Let us set this to user text. So the value of this name attribute will be used to send data of this text area to the server or backend. Now let's talk about radio buttons. Let's say we have multiple options and we want our user to select any one of the given option, any one. So in such cases, we use radio buttons. And in HTML, to create a radio button, we use the input tag and we set the type to radio. And since we are creating a set of options, so for each input tag for the given radio buttons, we set the name attribute to a given value. Let's say in this case, fruits. And let's say the first option is apple. Similarly, let's say the second radio button and we set the name to fruits, and the second radio button is for mango. And the third radio button is for orange. And finally, the last radio button is others. So we have 4 options and we can select only one option by clicking on it. So when we click on any one of the option, you can see a dot appears. That means it is selected. Now let's say we want the 4th option, others, to be selected whenever this page loads. In that case, we add the checked attribute to this input tag. And now whenever the page reloads, the 4th option, others, will be always selected. And for each input tag for this radio buttons, we can use the value attribute. So for the first option, we'll set the value attribute to apple. For the second option, the value of the value attribute will be mango. For the third option, orange. And for the last option, the value of this value attribute will be others. Now let us talk about the checkbox. Let's say we have multiple options and this time we want the user to select 0 or more options. So in that case, we use checkbox. So in order to create checkbox in HTML, we use the input tag and we set the type to checkbox. And since we are creating a set of options, so we set the name attribute to a given value for all the checkboxes. So set the name to, let's say, text editor. And let's say the first option value is atom. And let's say the second checkbox value is brackets. And let's say our third option is type checkbox name editor. And let's say our third option is sublime text. So we get 3 options, and now the user can select 0 or more options. So let's say I want to select atom, so I'll click on it and a tick mark will appear. And let's say I want to select sublime text, and I also want to select brackets. So when you click on it, a tick mark will appear, and when you click on it again, the tick mark will disappear. Now let's say we want the atom option to be selected by default. In that case, we will add the checked attribute to this input tag. So now if we reload this page, we will always get the atom option selected. Now let's say we want a drop-down menu having some options, and we want the user to select any one of the given options. So let us go ahead and create a drop-down menu using select tag. And inside the opening closing select tag, we will create options using the option tag. And let's say the first value is empty. So we'll assign the value attribute dash. And let's say the second option is for, let's say, Mac OS. So we'll assign this attribute value Mac OS. And let's say the third option is Windows. And let's say the fourth option is Ubuntu. So we have 4 options in this drop-down. And by default, the first option is selected. So now the user can select any one of the given options. So let's say if you want to select Ubuntu, you click on it and you'll see Ubuntu. Similarly, macOS and Windows. And let's say we want Ubuntu to be selected by default whenever this page loads. So in that case, we will add the selected attribute. And now if we reload this page, we'll always get Ubuntu selected by default. Another input field that is commonly used in forms is the hidden input field. And as the name suggests, it is not displayed when the page loads. So let us go ahead and create an input tag. And to create a hidden input field, we set the type attribute value to hidden. And this hidden input field can take the value attribute, which holds some value. Let's say this is a hidden value. And it can also take the name attribute, let's say hidden field value. So if we reload this page, we don't get to see this hidden input field, but it is there in this form. And we generally use hidden input fields to store some value that we want to send to the server, or we want to use that value inside the form, but we don't want to show it to the user. So in such scenarios, we generally use the hidden input field. Now the two commonly used buttons inside a form is the reset button and the submit button. The submit button is used to submit the data from the form to the backend. And the reset button, as the name suggests, is used to reset the form. That is, it will clear the input fields. So let us go ahead and create a reset button. So we'll write input type and we'll set the value of the type attribute to reset, and we'll set the value to reset. So we have a reset button, and let us go ahead and create a submit button. So we'll create an input tag and we'll set the type attribute value to submit, and we'll set the value to submit. So we have the reset button and the submit button. Alright guys, this brings us to the end of this tutorial. I'll post the tutorial notes on my website dyclassroom.com. The link will be in the description, and all the code that we are writing in this tutorial series, I'll put them in my GitHub repository. The link will be in the description, so please check that out. And if you find this video interesting, then please subscribe my channel and give this video a like. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video, and like always, stay happy and keep smiling. Bye.